I'm really glad you're here tonight. This hour is different from the rest of the day. It doesn't ask you to decide anything. It doesn't ask you to perform or explain or keep up. It simply invites you to lie still and let your thoughts move at their own pace. As the years pass, nighttime becomes a kind of companion, a place where the mind is free to wander without interruption, where memories return, not urgently, but patiently, where understanding settles in quietly, without needing words. Later in life, the mind doesn't race the way it once did. It reflects, it revisits, it connects dots that once seemed unrelated, and it does this most honestly when the lights are off and the world has gone silent. This space is for those thoughts, the ones that don't surface during the day, the ones that arrive only when you're alone with yourself, resting, remembering, and gently making sense of a long, lived-in life. So take a slow breath, let your body soften into the bed, and allow this night to meet you where you are. And now, before we begin, if this kind of honest, gentle reflection speaks to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And down in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. There's something comforting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across time zones, but united in these late hours when the world finally grows still. So settle in, adjust your pillows, find a comfortable position, and know that for the next hour, you're not alone in whatever wisdom you're carrying, whatever understanding you've earned, whatever truths rise to the surface when the lights go out. Let's begin. The room is quiet now, really quiet. The kind of quiet that only exists after a certain hour, after the world has pulled back its noise and gone about its own rest. Maybe you can hear the low hum of something in the kitchen. Maybe the sound of wind pressing gently against the window glass. A car passing somewhere far down the street and then gone. And then the silence reclaims everything again. You are lying here, still, calm. Your body is horizontal and the weight of the day is beginning slowly to loosen its hold on your shoulders, on your jaw, on the tight place behind your eyes that you carry so often you've forgotten what it feels like not to carry it. The darkness is settled around you, like something that has nowhere else to be, like something patient. But your mind is not settled. It isn't racing exactly. It isn't the frantic, cluttered spinning of a younger mind, overwhelmed with deadlines and obligations and the sheer volume of what needs doing. This is something different, something quieter, but somehow more persistent. A slow circling, a gentle, unhurried return to thoughts that weren't quite finished during the day, to questions that have no neat answers, to feelings that have been waiting politely for exactly this moment, when everything else has gone quiet and there is nowhere left to hide from yourself. This is what sleep feels like after 55. It doesn't always come when you call it. Sometimes it arrives quickly, like a door swinging open, and you pass through it without ceremony. But other nights like tonight perhaps, sleep stands just outside that door and waits. It waits while you lie here wide awake inside your own head, moving through the rooms of your mind at a pace that feels both unhurried and impossible to stop. Neither rushing nor resting, just moving, just thinking, just being alive in the particular way that the middle of the night demands. You've noticed this about yourself. The older you get, the more your mind wants to use nighttime differently, not as a simple off switch, not as a void between today and tomorrow, but as something more deliberate, as a space where the unprocessed parts of your day and your life quietly request your attention, where the things you were too busy to feel during daylight hours finally get their turn. You notice things at night that you don't notice during the day. Small things, important things. You notice the way a conversation from this morning is still sitting with you, still unresolved in some corner of your chest. You notice the thought you had earlier that you pushed aside because the moment wasn't right. And now the moment is finally right and the thought is still there, still waiting. You take a breath, a real one. Not the shallow, functional kind you breathe all day long, the kind that just keeps you moving from one task to the next. This one is slower. It fills you more completely. It reaches down into parts of your chest that tightened somewhere around mid-afternoon and never quite let go again. The mattress holds you, the familiar shape of it, the slight give where your body presses in. The pillow you have adjusted 1,000 times and will adjust 1,000 times more without ever quite deciding it is perfect. These small physical details anchor you here, in this body, in this room, in this single night that is yours and no one else's. And the inner monologue begins, the way it always begins, because the mind does not stop, simply because the day is over. It continues, it processes, it wonders, it revisits. And tonight, it wants to tell you something. It wants you to listen. You start with tomorrow, not with dread, just with that low hum of awareness about what's expected of you when the sun comes back. The call you haven't returned, the errand that keeps getting postponed, the thing you said you'd handle and didn't. You note these things without judgment. You lock them quietly in the back of your mind, and then you put them down. You set tomorrow gently at the edge of the room, and you tell it to wait, because tonight belongs to something else. When tomorrow steps back, the day that just ended moves through you instead. The events of it, the people, the small exchanges that seemed ordinary in the moment, but now, turning them over in the quiet, reveals something you didn't catch the first time. The way someone paused before answering, the way a certain silence sat between two people who didn't know how to say what they actually meant. The way a small kindness landed on you unexpectedly and warmed you for an hour without your quite knowing why. This is something about growing older that genuinely surprised you. You didn't expect to become this perceptive, this attuned to the texture of ordinary moments. When you were younger, you moved through days efficiently, one thing to the next. There was never quite enough time for the subtext, the undertones, the quietly significant details living underneath the surface of daily life. But now, here in bed, in the dark, you find yourself reading your own days the way you would read a carefully written book, going back over certain passages, catching what you missed the first time, understanding more fully on the second reading than you ever did on the first. You think about the people you crossed paths with today, their faces, the expressions that moved across them briefly, honestly, before being composed back into whatever each of them needed the world to see. and you realize you saw those unguarded moments. You were present enough to catch them. That brief accidental passage of one human life connecting with another, even over something small, even over nothing more than a shared glance or a simple word offered at the right second. These moments matter to you now in ways they didn't always. You used to rush past them. You used to be somewhere else in your head even while your body was present in the conversation. But somewhere along the way, somewhere in the accumulation of years, you began arriving more fully to small things. You started noticing the texture of ordinary life with more attention and more care. You started understanding that the unremarkable exchanges are not the spaces between the important parts of living. They are the important parts of living. They are the whole thing. Sleep still hasn't come, and that is perfectly all right. You shift your position, adjust the blanket. Your body knows what it needs, and you've gotten much better at listening to it than you used to be. It has its own quiet wisdom, this body. It sends signals, and it has been sending them for years, and you have slowly, finally, learned to hear them. You think about this body tonight, the one you are living inside right now, how it feels specifically in this moment. The familiar aches that have become such a constant presence, you barely notice them except in moments exactly like this one, when everything is still and quiet and there is nothing else demanding your attention. The stiffness that greets you in the morning before you've had time to remember it's coming. The knee that speaks up after a long day on your feet. The lower back that holds the history of every heavy thing you've ever carried, literally and otherwise. You hear these things now without the alarm you used to feel, without the immediate anxious leap to worst-case conclusions, without the quiet terror that something being wrong in your body meant that you were failing somehow, that the body's complaints were accusations. Now you hear them with something more like understanding, with something approaching compassion. This body has carried you a very long way. Of course it's tired. Of course it shows the marks of years. Of course it needs more rest than it once did, more gentleness, more deliberate care. That is not failure. That is simply time, doing what time does, and you inside of it, doing your best to be a good steward of the only home you will ever truly live in. You remember when your body was essentially invisible to you, when you were young enough that it simply functioned without asking for anything in return. You didn't thank it. You didn't notice it mostly. You expected it to recover from whatever you put it through. And it did, obediently, for a long time. You pushed it without thinking much about the pushing. You stayed up too late and woke too early and asked it to perform under conditions that were far from kind. And it complied quietly, year after year, because that is what bodies do when they are young and full of fuel they haven't yet learned to conserve. Now the relationship is different, more negotiated, more mutual. You have learned to read its signals with something like fluency, to pace yourself through days with more intelligence, to stop when stopping is asked for most of the time, to treat the body's limits as information rather than obstruction. This is one of the quiet, unexpected gifts of aging. This new attentiveness to the physical self, this willingness to listen instead of override. But lying here in the dark, there is also something else rising in you, a quality of gratitude that surfaces in moments like this, when you are still and breathing and present and intact, when you can feel your own heartbeat in the silence, that steady, faithful pulse that has never once stopped, not through a single difficult night, not through illness or grief or the very worst days, not through loss or fear or the moments when everything else seemed to be falling. It has kept its own steady time through all of it, without being asked, without being thanked, without ever taking a single night off. There is something almost miraculous in that, if you allow yourself to feel it fully. This body has been working for you since before you had any awareness at all, before you had language or memory, or the ability to form a single conscious thought. It was already doing its extraordinary, intricate, invisible work, and it is still doing it, right now. While you lie here, turning over your regrets and your worries and your unfinished thoughts, it is quietly, faithfully, doing its work. You breathe out slowly. You let something soften that has been held tight for a long time. Your mind moves now towards something older, a memory. You're not entirely sure why it's here tonight. Memories choose their own timing, their own reasons for arriving. They show up when they show up, and the logic behind their arrival is often buried too deep to trace. But this one is here, present, detailed in the particular way that only very old memories are detailed. The ones that have been returned to so many times they have been worn smooth and luminous, like stones carried long in a river. You can feel the season inside it, the quality of the light, the way the air smelled. You were younger, significantly younger. The person in that memory feels almost like someone you know deeply, but have not seen in years. Like a dear friend who moved away and writes less than they should. You watch the memory without trying to change it, without the need to arrive at a conclusion about it. Just watching, the way you might watch a film you've seen before and know well, but find yourself noticing something different in it each time you return. Some small gesture, some expression on a face, something that the first dozen times you watched, you simply weren't yet equipped to understand. There are things you would do differently. You sit with that knowledge without flinching from it, because you've practiced this. You've had years of practice. There are words you said that you wish you could take back. There are words you never said that needed saying, and the window for saying them closed before you found your courage or your clarity. There are moments when you were less than you knew how to be, less patient, less generous, less present than the situation required of you, and that you wished later you had managed to give. This is the accounting that happens in beds like this one, in nights like this one. The honest, private reckoning with a life lived as a human being who was imperfect in human ways and who kept going anyway. But here is what you have learned about regret, and this is hard-won knowledge, the kind that only comes from carrying it long enough to understand its actual weight. Regret is only useful when it teaches you something, when it genuinely changes the next choice, when it softens the next moment of impatience or thoughtlessness or fear, when it moves through you and leaves behind some real, usable understanding. That is when regret earns its place. When it is only pain. When it is just a wound you return to in the dark without learning anything new from the returning, then it has stopped being a teacher and become simply a burden. And you don't have to keep carrying things that no longer teach you anything. You did what you should with what you had at the time you had it. That younger version of you knew less, was afraid of different things, had fewer tools, made decisions from a different place with a different understanding of what was possible and what was at stake. You cannot hold that person to the standard you hold yourself to now. That would be like failing a child for not knowing what adults know. It would be unjust. And you are trying these days to be just, even with yourself, especially with yourself. You were doing your best, even when your best caused pain, even when your best fell short of what the moment needed. You were doing your best. And that has to be enough, because it was everything there was. The room feels gentler now than it did when you first lay down. Something has moved through you. You can feel the slight releasing in your chest, the way your jaw unclenches without your deliberately unclenching it, the way the sheets register more clearly against your skin now, because you are more fully present in your body than you were a few minutes ago. Sleep is still not here, but it feels less distant than it did. There is something else you want to sit with for a moment. Something that doesn't get named very often. Not in daylight, not in polite conversation, not even among people who know each other well. It is the specific loneliness of being awake when everyone else is asleep. Not the dramatic loneliness of grief or abandonment. Something quieter than that. The ordinary, bittersweet loneliness of being conscious and alive and thinking at an hour when thinking is supposed to be over. When the world has decided that the day's business is concluded and all the good, sensible people have closed their eyes and surrendered. You are not asleep. And part of you wonders, as it always has, whether that makes you different somehow. Whether there is something in you that simply cannot let go as easily as others do. Whether the thoughts that come to you in the night are a burden or a gift, or both simultaneously, which is probably the truest answer. You have spent years in this company, the company of your own mind in the small hours. You know its habits by now. You know which thoughts tend to arrive first, which ones come later, which ones are the ones that have always kept you company, and which ones are newer, shaped by this particular chapter of your life. There is a strange intimacy in that knowledge, a strange comfort in knowing yourself this well, even if what you know is not always easy, even if what you know includes the parts you'd rather not look at too closely. But you do look, because you've learned that looking is better than not looking, that the things you don't examine have a way of making themselves felt anyway, sideways, indirectly, in mood and physical tension, and the particular quality of a night that won't end. So you look, you sit with what's there. You allow yourself the honesty of seeing yourself clearly, without performance, without the face you wear for other people, without the edited, composed version of yourself you send out into the daylight world. Just you, just this, just the truth of what it feels like to be you. tonight, in this life, at this particular turning point of it. And what it feels like is complicated, as it always has been, as perhaps it always will be. Life at any age is complicated if you're paying attention. But there is a particular complication to these years that you didn't anticipate. A layering of things. Joy and grief living inside the same moment. Pride and regret visiting at the same time. The awareness of how much has been given alongside the awareness of how much has been lost. The gratitude that coexists, uneasy but real, with the mourning. You are learning to hold these things at once, to not make them compete with each other, to not feel that the joy diminishes the grief, or that the grief negates the joy. They are both true. They have both earned their place in you. They both deserve to be felt fully, without apology, without the need to choose one over the other. This is what it means to live deeply. This is what it means to have truly arrived at the later chapters with your eyes open, not the managed distance of someone who has protected themselves too well from feeling, but the full, complex, textured experience of someone who let things matter, who let love in, who let loss land, who stayed present through the hardest parts because running away was never really an option, or because you tried running once and found it didn't work the way you hoped. You are still here. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. You think now about the people you love. This is where the mind tends to settle in the quiet hours, not anxiously, usually, not with the spinning worry of an earlier decade, but with a low, constant, faithful warmth. You think about them, the ones who are close and the ones who are far, the ones you spoke to recently and the ones you haven't spoken to in longer than you meant to let it go, the ones who are well and the ones who are struggling, the ones who are still in the world and the ones who are not. There is a particular quality to love in later life that is genuinely difficult to describe to someone who hasn't yet lived their way into it. It is less fevered than it was, less mixed up with need and expectation and the urgent requirement that love be returned in precisely the form you offer it. It is quieter than that, steadier, more like a deep, abiding recognition than a burning demand, more like gratitude than hunger, the simple, almost aching fact of someone's existence being a gift to yours, the knowledge that this person is in the world or was in the world, and that your life has been shaped by theirs in ways you are still discovering. That seems to be enough most of the time. Just knowing, just remembering, just feeling the warmth of it without needing it demonstrated or confirmed or renewed tonight. You bring someone specific into this quiet space with you, someone you love, not to solve anything, not because there is a worry attached, just to be near them in thought the way you might be near them in presence, just to feel the particular texture of that love, the way it is different from every other love you carry, the way it has made a shape in you that nothing else could have made. You have been shaped by love more than by anything else, more than by your achievements or your failures, more than by the things you built or the things that fell apart. The relationships have been the real architecture, the ones that lasted and the ones that ended. The easy ones and the ones that cost you everything you had. The ones you chose and the ones that simply arrived in your life like weather and then stayed and became central to your story without your ever quite deciding to let them be. You think about that, how little choice there was really in who you loved. It arrived. It arrived in the form of a person, and you either opened the door or you didn't. And the opening, the saying yes when you could have stayed safely closed, those were among the best things you ever did, even when they eventually became sources of loss, even when they left gaps in you that have never quite filled back in. The opening was right. The opening was everything. Love and loss are not opposites. You understand this now in a way you couldn't have as a younger person, when loss felt like a punishment, like something being taken from you unfairly. Now it feels more like evidence, proof that the love was real, proof that something mattered enough to leave a real space when it was gone. The size of the grief is proportional to the size of what was loved. And so when the grief is large, that is not a tragedy. That is the shadow of something enormous and beautiful that stood in that space before. The night is deep now. The house is fully settled into sleep. The world outside has gone to that particular quiet that only exists in the hours after midnight. A quality of stillness that is different from evening stillness, heavier somehow, more complete, as though the night has finally finished becoming itself and can now simply be. You are still awake, still here, still inside the long, honest conversation you have been having with yourself. And that is not a problem. That is not something to push against, or fix, or apologize for. You did not always know this. In earlier decades, when sleep refused to come, you resisted it. You lay rigid and frustrated and watched the ceiling and watched the time and felt the frustration building into something that made sleep even less possible than it had been before. You believed the inability to sleep was a failure, something you were doing wrong. You wondered what was broken in you that couldn't manage what seemed to come so effortlessly to everyone else. Now you know that the mind, in its own particular wisdom, sometimes has work to complete before it can rest. The inner monologue that keeps you awake is not your enemy. It is your interior life doing what it needs to do, processing, integrating, making quiet peace with whatever is still unsettled. And it has its own timetable, its own sense of what needs attending to and in what order. Resisting it has never once made it move faster. Arguing with it has never once won the argument. So you stop resisting. You let the thoughts come. You let them move through you the way weather moves through, without grabbing onto them, without following any single one too far down the path it wants to lead you. Just noticing, just acknowledging, just being present to your own interior life the way you would be present to something outside yourself that deserved your full attention. I should have said something different earlier today, and the night holds that thought with care and without judgment. I've been carrying that old worry again, the one I thought I'd put down, and the night holds that too, gently. I wonder if I'm enough, if I've been enough. The question floats up, old and familiar, and the night receives it without alarm. I miss them more tonight than I usually let myself, and the night understands. These thoughts, so quiet, so ordinary on the surface, so quietly significant underneath. The small, honest residue of a life being lived with real attention, with real care, with the ongoing daily work of being present to yourself and to the people and moments that matter to you. They don't need solving tonight. They simply needed to be spoken, even if only to the darkness, even if only to yourself. You have given them that. You have acknowledged them. And in the acknowledging, something in you has relaxed. You breathe again, all the way down, slowly. The blanket is warm and steady over you. The darkness is deep but not threatening. The quiet is full but not empty. You are here, and you are breathing, and you have lived a life that was worth the living, with all its difficulty and all its grace and all the long, complicated, beautiful middle where most of the real living happened. Sleep will come when it comes. And until it does, you will simply be here. Present to yourself. Present to this night. Present to the extraordinary, ordinary fact of being alive and thoughtful and still at this hour. Still curious about the shape of things. This is not insomnia. This is reflection. This is the interior life insisting gently and firmly on being honored. This is what it means to be awake, not just in your body, but in your life. Close your eyes if they want to close. Soften your hands. Let your shoulders settle. The night is holding you. The darkness is gentle. And somewhere not far from here, sleep is already moving in your direction. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to do anything. You only need to be here exactly as you are, in this bed, in this body, in this moment that is yours and quiet and real. Rest now, or simply be still. Either is enough. Both are right. Rest now, or simply be still. Either is enough. Both are right. There is one more thing the night wants you to know. Something simple, something that doesn't need many words, but needs to be said anyway, because you have not been saying it to yourself nearly enough. Not in daylight, not in the busyness and the forward motion and the endless task of managing a life. You have done well, not perfectly, not without cost, not without the occasional spectacular failure or the quiet, grinding difficulty of keeping going when keeping going felt impossible. But you have done well. You have loved people and been loved by them. You have shown up, imperfectly, but consistently, for the things and people that mattered. You have survived things you didn't think you would survive, and come out the other side changed, but intact. You have kept your promises more often than you broke them. You have grown in ways you couldn't have predicted. You have become, slowly and honestly, more yourself with every passing year, not less. This is what a life looks like from the inside at this hour. Not a highlight reel, not a resume. Just this, the ordinary, extraordinary human work of making it through, with care, with love, with enough honesty to see yourself clearly, and enough mercy to forgive what you see. You are enough. You have always been enough. And tonight, in this bed, in this quiet, in this company of your own truthful mind, that is not a small thing to know. The first half of this night is yours to settle into, and you are slowly, gently, honestly settling. And so the night continues, not in a hurry, not with any particular urgency, just continuing the way deep nights do, one quiet breath at a time, one thought dissolving into the next, the darkness steady and unhurried around you, while your mind does the slow, important work it has always done best in these hours. You are still here, still awake, still present, and that is perfectly all right. There is a particular quality to this second half of the night, this deeper hour that you have come to know well across the years. The first hour in bed tends to hold the day's unfinished business, the practical residue, the conversations and concerns and small, unresolved tensions that follow you from daylight into dark. But once those have been acknowledged, once the day has been given its proper hearing and released to the edge of the room, something shifts. The mind drops a layer. It goes somewhere older, somewhere quieter, somewhere that doesn't have anything to do with tomorrow's list or yesterday's regret. Somewhere that feels, if you let yourself go there honestly, less like a problem to be solved and more like a place to simply be. You are in that place now, that deeper stratum of the night, where the thoughts that arrive are not about doing, but about being. Not about managing, but about understanding. Not about what comes next, but about what has already been, and what it means, and why it matters, and how the long arc of a life makes a kind of sense that you could not have seen from inside any single moment of it. You think about time, not with anxiety, not with the particular dread that the word sometimes carries, just thinking about it, the way you think about something that has become familiar enough to no longer frighten you. Time, how differently it moves now than it once did, how the texture of it has changed. When you were young, time was abundant and mostly invisible. It was simply the medium you moved through. There was always more of it ahead than behind, and so it didn't require much conscious attention. You spent it without noticing you were spending it. The way you spend money when you believe there will always be more where that came from. Carelessly, not unkindly, just without full awareness of its value. Then something shifted. You cannot name the exact moment because it did not arrive as a moment. It arrived gradually, the way seasons change, too slow to catch in the act, only visible in retrospect. You began to feel time differently, to notice its passage in ways you hadn't before, to sense the finite nature of it, not as an abstraction, but as a lived reality, pressing gently against the present moment. And here is what surprised you. It did not feel like loss, exactly, or not only like loss. It felt more like a clarification, like a lens coming slowly into focus. When you understood that time was finite, not theoretically, but genuinely, in your body, in your daily life, the things that were worth spending it on became clearer. The things that were not worth spending it on became clearer too. The noise fell away. The performances became less interesting. The opinions of people who did not truly know or love you lost their grip. The need to be seen in a particular way softened into something more like a mild preference rather than an urgent, consuming requirement. You became quietly and without making a fuss about it, more yourself. This is one of the gifts of these years that no one talks about enough. The gift of knowing your own mind more clearly, of being less persuadable by other people's ideas about who you should be, of sitting in your own company without the constant low-level restlessness that younger life so often carries. The ability to simply be in a room, in a bed, in a night, without needing it to be different than it is. You have earned this. It did not come for free. It came through all the years of trying and failing and trying again, through all the versions of yourself you had to outgrow, through all the things you thought you needed that turned out not to matter, and through the long process of figuring out what actually did. You have earned this. It did not come for free. It came through all the years of trying and failing and trying again, through all the versions of yourself you had to outgrow, through all the things you thought you needed that turned out not to matter, and through the long process of figuring out what actually did. Let yourself rest for a moment in that knowledge. Really rest in it, not as an idea, but as a felt experience. You are someone who has done a significant amount of living. You have navigated things that were genuinely difficult. You have adapted to changes you did not choose and could not have predicted. You have lost people and you have found people. You have built things and watched things fall and built again. You have made mistakes significant enough to cost you, and you have paid what was owed and kept moving. You have had days when getting out of bed was an act of considerable courage, and you got out of bed anyway and went out into a world that was not always easy or kind or fair, and you did what the day required of you, and then you came home and you lay down in the dark and you started again. This is what a life looks like, not from the outside, where it might appear as a series of events and outcomes, but from the inside, where it is always just this: one day and then the next, one night and then the next. The accumulation of small, consistent, mostly unwitnessed acts of showing up, of continuing, of keeping the faith with yourself and with the people who depend on you, and with the quiet belief, held sometimes against significant evidence, that it matters to try, that it matters to care, that the effort of being a good person in an imperfect world is worth making, even when the results are invisible or ambiguous or long delayed. It matters. All of it mattered. Every day you showed up when you didn't want to. Every act of patience you managed when impatience would have been easier. Every time you chose the harder, truer thing over the easier, comfortable thing. Every moment of genuine kindness you offered to someone who needed it, whether they acknowledged it or not, whether you ever knew whether it helped or not. It mattered. Your breath moves in and out, slow, easy, the kind of breathing you don't have to manufacture, that simply happens when the body is relaxed enough to do what it knows how to do. There is something you carry that you don't often allow yourself to examine directly. Something that sits at the center of the quiet. Worry you felt on and off throughout your life. The worry about whether you got it right, whether you made the choices that were yours to make and made them wisely enough, whether the life you've lived was the one you were supposed to live, or whether there was another one, a better one, a version of you who chose differently at certain crossroads and arrived somewhere richer, more complete, less marked by regret, You know this worry. You've known it for a long time. It visits you more in the night than in the day. It arrives quietly, without announcing itself, and sits beside you in the dark and asks its old, familiar questions. What if? What might have been? What you would do if you could go back? And here, in the honesty of this deep hour, you can say something true about that worry. Something you may not have been quite ready to say before. The other life, the one you imagine, might have been better. The one where you chose differently at the crossroads. That life would have had its own losses, its own regrets, its own nights when you lay awake wondering what might have been if you'd chosen differently. There is no path through a human life that arrives at the place of no regrets. That place does not exist. The question is never whether you'll have regrets. The question is whether the life you built, with all its imperfect choices and its compromises and its detours and its costs, whether it contained the things that actually matter, whether it held love, whether it held genuine connection, whether it held moments of real beauty and real meaning, whether you were, in the truest sense, present for it. And you are. The path you walked was the one you walked. It brought you here, to this room, to this night, to this version of yourself that is, in more ways than you sometimes allow, exactly who you were always going to become, if you stayed honest and kept trying and refused to stop caring about the things worth caring about. You are the person all those years were building, and that person, lying here in the dark, is someone worth being. Your breath moves in and out, slow, easy. The kind of breathing you don't have to manufacture, that simply happens when the body is relaxed enough to do what it knows how to do. You think about the chapters, the long, distinct chapters of your life that feel, from this distance, like different books almost, written by recognizably the same hand, but in such different circumstances, with such different understanding, that they are almost separate stories. The young chapter, the one full of becoming, full of trying things on and discarding them and trying other things, full of the exhilarating and terrifying work of figuring out who you were going to be. The passionate chapter, the one where you loved hard and worked hard and built things with your hands and your time and your whole concentrated self. The complicated chapter, the one where everything got more layered, where the easy certainties dissolved and the real textured understanding began. And this chapter, the one you are living now, the one that the younger chapters were, in some sense, always moving toward. You would not trade this chapter for any of the others. That is something worth sitting with, not because it has been without difficulty, not because every day is golden and uncomplicated. It hasn't been, and they aren't. This chapter has its own shadows, its own losses, its own adjustments that have required more from you than you always had to give. But it has also been the chapter of genuine arrival, the chapter where the things you spend all those years trying to understand have finally started to become clear, where the work you did on yourself has started to pay off in the currency that actually matters, which is the ability to be present, to be kind, to be honest, to love without agenda, to sit quietly in the dark and feel, not dread, but something closer to gratitude for the strange and remarkable gift of having been alive at all. The room is very quiet. You notice the quality of the silence differently now than you did an hour ago. When you first lay down, the silence felt active somehow, expectant, charged with all the things your mind hadn't yet finished processing. But now the silence has softened. It has become something more like companionship, something more like understanding, as though the night itself has been sitting here with you, listening to the long interior monologue. And now it is simply present beside you, the way a good friend is present, not requiring anything, not offering solutions, just here. You have known people like that in your life, the ones who could sit with you in difficulty without rushing to fix it, without offering easy reassurances that you both knew were not entirely true, without filling the silence with noise, simply because silence made them uncomfortable. You have known people who could be genuinely present to your pain or your confusion or your uncertainty without needing to make it go away for your sake or for their own. Those people were rare, and they were among the most important people in your life. Their presence was a form of love that most people never learn how to offer. You think about them now, the people who sat with you, the ones who stayed when staying was hard, the ones who didn't run from your difficult parts, who looked at the parts of you that were frightened or angry or lost or just plain difficult to be around and stayed anyway, who saw the worst of you and decided that the whole of you was still worth knowing, still worth staying for. This is not a small thing to have received. This is not something you should take for granted, even now, even after all the years. To have been truly known by another person and kept anyway is among the deepest forms of grace that one human being can offer another. You are that person for someone too. You need to know this and to let yourself actually feel it, not dismiss it modestly, not slide quickly past it to your failures and shortcomings. You are that person for someone. You sat with someone in their difficulty. You stayed when staying was hard. You looked at the frightening and complicated parts of someone you loved and decided to stay, to keep knowing them, to keep choosing them. You offered that grace. You gave that gift. It is worth something. It is worth more than you usually let yourself acknowledge. Because in a world that moves fast and asks a great deal and often rewards the surface over the depth, the decision to stay and truly know someone, to be truly present to their full humanity, rather than just the parts that are easy or admirable or convenient, that decision is one of the finest things a person can do. You did it. Not perfectly. Not without moments when you pulled back, when you chose your own comfort over the discomfort of staying fully present. But on balance, over the long arc of things, you chose love. You chose presence. You chose people. And the shape your life has taken is the shape of those choices. The darkness outside the window has that particular depth that comes before the first pale suggestion of dawn. You are not there yet. The night is still firmly itself. But there is a quality in the air, very subtle, like a shift in the atmosphere before weather arrives, that tells you the night is moving towards its end, even though it has not yet begun to show it. You notice this and you do not feel the urgency you might once have felt at this hour. The old version of you would have been calculating by now. How many hours until the alarm? Whether there was still time to get enough sleep. You would have been watching the clock with the particular anxiety that only deepens as morning gets closer, creating a kind of self-defeating spiral where the worry about not sleeping prevents the sleeping that would end the worry. You don't do that now, or you do it less. You've learned slowly, through long practice, that the night gives you what it gives you, and that fighting the offering does not improve it, that the body will rest when it is ready, and that the mind will quiet when its work is done, and that these things happen on their own schedule, not yours. And trying to force them is like trying to force water to flow uphill. It simply cannot be done. And the trying exhausts you in ways that make the morning harder than the sleepless night itself. So you rest. Even if you are not sleeping, you are resting. Even if the mind is still moving, the body is still. And that is something. That is, in fact, quite a lot. The body's rest is doing its own quiet work even while the mind remains awake. Even this night of slow, wandering wakefulness is giving you something. It is giving you this long, honest conversation with yourself, this unhurried visit to the rooms of your own interior, this time that belongs to no one and nothing but you. You think about what you want, not in the practical sense of immediate desire, but in the deeper sense. What you actually want your life to hold, going forward. What you still hope for. What you still believe might be possible. Because you do still hope. This surprises people sometimes. The ones who assume that later life is primarily a process of letting go of wanting, of arriving at a kind of peaceful emptiness. And while there is some truth in the letting go, the releasing of things that no longer serve, the quieting of ambitions that were always more about fear than about genuine desire, there is also this continued, quiet, insistent wanting, this belief that there is still something ahead worth moving toward, something still to experience, something still to understand, someone still to love more fully or differently, or with the particular quality of attention and presence that only these years of practice have made possible. You want to see things you haven't seen yet. Not necessarily the grand things, the famous destinations, though maybe those too, but the small, specific things. The particular quality of morning light in a place you've never been. The texture of a landscape that is different from all the landscapes you know. The way a conversation opens up when it has time and trust and no particular place to be. The moment when something you've been trying to understand for years suddenly becomes clear, not through effort, but through the quiet accumulation of living long enough for the pieces to arrange themselves. You want to keep growing. This, perhaps more than anything, is what you still want. To not arrive at the place where you have decided you know everything you're going to know, feel everything you're going to feel, become everything you're going to become. That place, the place of arrival and completion, feels less like rest and more like a kind of premature closing. You're not ready to close. You have more pages. You can feel them, blank but waiting, full of the possibility of sentences you haven't yet written, experiences you haven't yet had, understandings you haven't yet reached. And this is worth naming clearly, because the world does not always make space for the continuing ambitions of people in later life. The world sometimes assumes that after a certain age, the wanting naturally subsides, that the inner life quiets into something purely retrospective, that the most important growing is finished, and what remains is simply maintenance and memory. But you know this is not true. You know it from the inside. You know that the growing that happens in these years is not lesser than the growing that happened before. In many ways, it is deeper, more rooted, more genuinely transformative, because it is happening in soil that has been prepared by everything that came before it, because it is not the frantic growth of someone who doesn't yet know themselves, reaching in every direction, trying to find the shape of who they are. It is the quieter, more deliberate growth of someone who knows exactly which direction the light is coming from and who turns toward it with intention. You are turning toward it, even now. Even lying here in the dark, apparently motionless, apparently at rest, something in you is still reaching, still curious, still open to what comes next. That is not a small thing to be. It is, in fact, a kind of courage. This wanting is not grasping. It does not come from dissatisfaction with what is. You are genuinely, deeply grateful for what is, for this bed and this breath and this night and the long life that has brought you to this moment. The gratitude is real, but the wanting lives alongside the gratitude, not in contradiction to it, but as a companion to it. The gratitude says thank you for all of this, and the wanting says, and there is still more. Both are true. Both are right. Your eyes are heavier now than they were. You notice this without making anything of it, without clutching at it or trying to accelerate it. Simply noticing, the way you have been noticing everything tonight. The body doing its slow work, the mind beginning at last to lose its grip on the wakefulness it has been maintaining. Something is releasing. You can feel it. Not a sudden dropping, but a gradual, almost imperceptible softening. The thoughts that have been circling begin to slow their orbits. The questions that have been active become less insistent. The feelings that have been moving through you settle, not resolved exactly, but held, accepted, no longer requiring active attention, simply present and at rest, the way a body of water is at rest, still containing everything, still full, but no longer churning. You have done good work tonight, lying here in the dark, barely moving, apparently doing nothing. You have done the quiet, essential, invisible work of being present to your own life, of honoring the thoughts and feelings and memories that ask to be acknowledged, of sitting with what is difficult without running from it, and sitting with what is beautiful without clutching at it, of being simply and fully yourself. This is not nothing. This is perhaps everything. You think one last time about the people you love, not with urgency, just with warmth, just with the low, steady, faithful light that love becomes when it has been held long enough to stop being a fire and start being something more like the sun. Still warm, still life-giving, but no longer requiring constant tending, no longer in danger of going out. Simply present, simply illuminating, simply the background condition against which everything else in your life occurs. You love them, they know it, or they should know it, or you will find ways to make sure they know it. In the ordinary, unhurried ways that love is most truly communicated, not in grand gestures, but in attention, in remembering the things that matter to them, in showing up, in staying, in the 10,000 small acts of care and presence that accumulated over years become something larger than any single one of them, that become, together, a life lived in genuine relationship with other human beings. This is what you are most proud of, not the accomplishments, though some of those have been real, not the things you built or the goals you reached, but this, the relationships that were real, the love that was genuine, the presence you offered and received, the fact that you were here, in the world, among people connected, caring, part of the long human story of individuals trying to find and know and love one another against the odds. You are part of that story. You are part of it still. The night is almost done with its work now. You can feel the completion approaching, not as a sharp ending, but as a gentle rounding off. The way a long piece of music approaches its conclusion, moving toward resolution, not abruptly, but with the accumulated inevitability of everything that has come before, each phrase leading naturally to the next, each development preparing for the moment when the melody finally finds its rest. You are finding your rest, not because you have solved everything. You haven't, and you won't, and that is entirely as it should be. Life does not arrive at solutions. It arrives at understandings, at degrees of peace, at the capacity to hold the unsolvable, with enough grace that it no longer keeps you from the rest and presence you need. And you have arrived there, tonight, in the dark, through the long and worthwhile work of simply sitting with yourself and being honest about what you found. You let your hands uncurl. You hadn't realized they were slightly closed, slightly held, the way hands hold themselves when the body is still carrying some residual tension, some last bit of the day that hasn't yet fully released. But now they open, naturally, without effort, the fingers spreading and then resting, soft and open, against the sheet. Open hands are the posture of trust, of receiving, of letting go of the need to grip. You have been learning this posture for years, learning to hold things with open hands rather than closed ones, to love with open hands, to carry the past with open hands, to approach the future with open hands rather than the white-knuckled grip of someone who is afraid that if they don't hold on tightly enough, everything will fall away. Things do fall away. That is simply true. But the things that are truly yours, the love, the memory, the understanding, the shape of who you have become through everything you have lived, these cannot fall away. They are inside you. They are you. No loosening of the grip can remove them because they were never something you were holding from outside. They were always something you were made of. You are made of everything you have lived, every hard thing and every beautiful thing, every loss and every gift, every person who came into your life and changed something in you, whether they stayed or whether they went, every choice you made, the courageous ones and the fearful ones. Every moment of genuine connection. Every night you lay awake like this one and were honest with yourself in the dark. You are made of everything you have lived, every hard thing and every beautiful thing, every loss and every gift, every person who came into your life and changed something in you, whether they stayed or whether they went. Every choice you made, the courageous ones and the fearful ones. Every moment of genuine connection. Every night you lay awake like this one and were honest with yourself in the dark. Every morning you got up and tried again. Every single ordinary day, doing what was required. Every season of abundance and every season of scarcity. Every hope held or released. Every time you chose love when you could have chosen something easier. Every time you stayed when leaving would have been simpler. Every wound you healed and every one you are still healing. All of it is you. All of it is here, in this bed, breathing slowly, finally quieting, finally, at last, settling toward rest. Your eyes are closed now, or closing. The boundary between waking and sleeping is very thin at this hour, very permeable. Thoughts are beginning to lose their edges, to blur gently at their borders, the way objects blur when the light is very low. The distinction between what is real and what is memory and what is beginning to be dream grows soft, indistinct, beautiful in its indistinction. You are almost there. The fires die down, the stories settle, and the world grows still. Let your thoughts drift away like embers on the wind. Let the long, honest, necessary conversation of this night dissolve gently into silence. Let the memories rest. Let the feelings rest. Let the questions rest. Let everything that needed attending to tonight be grateful for the attention it received, and let it now, finally, be still. You have journeyed far through time tonight, through memory and love and regret and gratitude and the long, complicated, beautiful territory of a life fully and honestly lived. You have been present to yourself in the deepest way. You have honored the inner voice that speaks most truthfully only in the dark. You have done the invisible, essential work of being awake in your own life. Now it is time to journey into dreams. Close your eyes. Breathe. Let the darkness be soft and kind around you, because it is. Let the night hold you, because it will. Let the weight of everything you've carried today, and for all the days before today, be set down gently at the threshold of sleep. You don't need to carry it into dreams. It will be there when you wake. But for now, for these hours that remain, let it rest, and let yourself rest with it. You are enough. You have always been enough. Every version of you that has ever lain in a bed in the dark and wondered and worried and remembered and hoped, every single one of those versions was enough. The young one who was frightened, the middle one who was trying so hard, the one you are right now, quieter, wiser, more honestly yourself than you have ever been before. Enough, always, without exception, without condition. Good night. Let sleep find you now. It has been here, patient, waiting for you to finish your necessary work. And you have finished it. The night has been honored. The thoughts have been heard. The life has been acknowledged for the extraordinary, imperfect, deeply human, deeply real thing that it has been and continues to be. close your eyes. Breathe out slowly. Feel the bed beneath you and the blanket above you and the quiet all around you. You've journeyed far through time tonight. Now it's time to journey into dreams. Close your eyes, breathe, and let sleep find you.